friends, thank you for coming. This is meaningful for all of us, for the staff, for the students, for those of you who are here to learn. You're going to come out with more information than you certainly walked in with, and so we welcome you. My name is Jeannie Zoller, and I serve on the school board, and I serve currently as its president. And I want to thank you on behalf of the other members of the school board who are all here. You met a few at the table, and you'll see more as we split into our groups in a little bit. Tonight is a very important night. We're bringing together a lot of information, and we're sharing it, and we're asking for your feedback. And we're going to use that feedback to move on to the next step. So if we're on a continuum of work, we're still in the process of putting it all together. So please keep that in mind. We have a primary facilities steering committee made up of 38 people, of a broad spectrum, incredible numbers of talents and backgrounds together. I want to please bring them to your attention. They have met twice now, and they are committed to staying together and meeting and sharing ideas and looking at these options with a broad spectrum of points of view. And we welcome them. They're also throughout the audience tonight, and I'd like to make sure I tell you that the Board of Education thanks them for their work, and we're going to come through with a final plan that I know our community will be able to support and to have fabulous facilities for our primary kids when we get to the final end of this. Tonight's process will go, I'm going to turn this over to the architect. You're going to get a lot of information. Then if you notice on your the brochure we give you a number, you're going to go to that area where you will see boards and learn more about what the options are. There's a facilitator that will be there who will be able to answer some questions or direct you towards the boards and the information that's on them. You have three little dots, and Mike, you're going to explain the dots and questions. We're going to gather these questions and put together a frequently asked questions page of all the questions that come up tonight, and especially those that keep reoccurring. We want to make sure we get answers out to you as much as we possibly can. So that's what's going on tonight. I welcome you all and thank you for coming. And I'm now going to turn it over to Mike Ridgely, our Ridgely Architects.
My name is Mike Ridgely. It's great to be back with you again. I'm going to start by going over the process. How did we come up with these options, and how we're going to sort through them and move forward as a community. Give you some key updates. What is our budget? What did the traffic analysis say, and to what extent did the findings from the traffic analysis guide which direction of options we can consider? And then we did some looking at geotechnical up at Hilltop, which we'll talk about. All of those are kind of guardrails or drivers that can help inform the options before you tonight. And tonight we're presenting our first draft of 8 master plan options for you. There's 4 primary options and some variations of those. Hopefully we'll go over those. We'll talk about next steps, and then we'll do work session breakouts, which I'll describe closer to and how that will work. So in terms of process, so how did we figure out which options are here, and how did we get here? So we started by first reviewing all the planning work that's been done up to date prior to when we were onboarded in June. In September, we had 2 community conversations meetings where we just listened, and a lot of the feedback that happened that night, hopefully you'll see options in here that kind of reflect some of the feedback that we heard. We did draft analysis, we did a geotechnical study, we defined what our budget is, which is important. We established the primary facilities steering committee, who met once and reviewed concept options and provided input. We took that to the board in a work session. We went back to the primary facilities steering committee and said, help us kind of brainstorm pros and cons and factors of these. So all the summary of that process work is building up to what we're going to present tonight. So tonight is Community Forum 1. We're going to look at the conceptual options. After this, we're going to be doing online feedback, not statistically valid, so we want to use every touch point possible for you to be able to go online and provide your feedback of the options today. So here we are in fall 23. Moving forward into early spring of 2024, our goal is to refine and narrow down the options to several. We'll re-engage with the primary facility steering committee for input, back to the Board of Education, and then back to the community for Community Forum 2 for your continued input on those options. After that point, we'll do a statistically valid community survey that a Paul Fallon researcher will do. That will give us actual hard statistically valid survey that will help inform the board as to where the community is at. And this is all leading up until late spring of 2024, being in a position where we've narrowed down and selected what that final master plan option is. Circle back to the steering committee, back to the Board of Education, back to the community with forum number 3 for your last rounds of input. And then at this point, the board will be in a position to either decide to move forward with the issue, in which case you would have to make that decision in June 2024, potentially put something on the ballot in November 2024. Updates. So the very first one and the most important one is what is our potential budget? And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Treasurer Ryan.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rhonda Johnson, and I serve the district as the treasurer. And we do have to spend just a few minutes going over some budgetary definitions and just kind of a refresher about how bond issues work in the state of Ohio and here in Wyoming City Schools. So a bond issue is a property tax levy for a specific dollar amount, and that we would borrow money to finance construction or facility projects. The district sells the bonds and issues debt, and then we receive the revenue for the project all up front. Over the next 37 years, property taxes are levied, and then we receive that money to make the principal and interest payments on the debt. That might sound super similar to something that you're familiar with in your home life, that you also pay back over 15 or 20 or 30 years, and that thing is a mortgage. Okay, so in theory, that's kind of what we're doing. We borrow all of the money up front, and then the taxes are levied, and then we receive the tax money to make the principal and interest payments over the life of the debt. We have 2 of these currently outstanding. We passed a 1998 bond issue for this building, Wyoming High School, 4.96 mils. We're currently collecting. And that was originally an 8.2 mil voted levy. As values have gone up and generated more money on the principal and interest payments, the millage has come down. The second one that is still active is the 2012 bond issue for the middle school. 4.79 mils voted, currently collecting 3.91. I've started already to use this term mills. It's a common term when you talk about school tax levies here in Ohio, and it's just a term used to express tax rates. Mathematically, it's 0.001, 1/10 of 1% as defined in Ohio law. And mills generate revenue by multiplying them times a property's valuation. And 2 terms to remember there, market value and assessed value. Market value is what you're going to sell your home for. Assessed value is the value that you pay the taxes on, and those numbers are different. Assessed value is 35% of your market value, and again, the millage is calculated on the assessed value. So a super easy way to remember this is that 1 mil would cost the homeowner of a $100,000 home $35 per year. We are very clear that there are homes of other values, but that's an easy multiplier, okay? So 1 mil, about a $100,000 home, you can quickly multiply that to a different value of home and a different number of mills, okay? The next piece that we need to understand in Ohio is the debt limit. Ohio law limits the amount of debt that the school district can, so it limits our mortgage. Okay, so we have sort of a cap on our ability to borrow money. And that limit in Ohio law is 9% of our assessed valuation. So we add up all of the homes in Wyoming and we take take 35% of that market value to get to assessed value, and then our limit, so our mortgage limit is 9% of that number. And so if we just do the math there, and it's up on the screen, our current AV, multiply it times that 9%, but we have to back out what we're currently paying, right? So if you think about how this might apply like in your own life, you have a mortgage, and then you have to back out what you're paying down on other things, just kind of figure out what your limit is. And so as of today, what's available for us in new projects is only about 6.8 million, because our cap is 9% of our current AV. The law allows public schools in Ohio an exception to that. And the exception is something called a special needs consent. And it has to be approved by both the Ohio Department of Education, they recently changed their name, and the Ohio Department of Taxation, both ODE and ODT. And that consent is strictly a mathematical calculation. And it looks at the history of assessed valuation growth during reappraisal, and it forecasts that out to then apply a 9% limit in the future. And if you think about that, it makes sense, because we were paying this debt over the next 37 years, but property values are going to continue to grow. So the calculation takes into account that property values are going to grow over the next 30 years. So this calculation, using the tentative values that you received your letter in the mail for, you received a letter from the county auditor because Hamilton County and 40 other counties in Ohio are going through reappraisal. The new values, and taking into account the special needs consideration, our new debt limit, and then backing out what we currently have outstanding on projects, our new limit for this project is $68.4 million. And I know that was super detailed, but it's important that you just understand that there's sort of a lot in play with receiving that new debt limit. It's also important to know that this special needs consideration isn't new for Wyoming. We are a small community, less than 3 square miles, with really only residential tax base. And so it's likely that every time we go for a bond issue, we're going to need this special needs consideration. And we had to get it in 2012 for the middle school as well. The only thing this special needs consideration does is it just allows us to put the issue before the voters. It still has to be approved by the voters of Wyoming, but we have to go through this process. I share that with you because this process could be changed under current pending legislation in Ohio law. I mention that because there's quite a bit going on at the state level in terms of the process for reappraisal and those calculations. We're monitoring that very closely. That would have to be done by the end of calendar year 23 in order to impact all of our plans that we're going to hear about tonight. But I did just want to mention it because we're following it very closely, and it could make a shift in one, how our number is calculated, how our credit limit is calculated, and then two, what that means for us in terms of the timing of our plan. I explained all of that to you just so that Mike could move forward with the options, just so you understood where we were getting that budget number from.
Thank you, Rhonda. So traffic analysis. There were a couple options such options floated in the spring that envisioned a K-2 school at Vermont and a 3-5 school at Hilltop. So what we wanted to do before we started anything was to take a look at the capacity of your existing roadway structure to support increased student loads for the school. So what we did is we hired a traffic engineer, Plungers came out. They did on-site analysis at both Vermont and Hilltop. They observed the drop-off scenario and the pickup scenario. They counted cars, they watched vehicular movement, they watched parent drop-off, they watched students crossing roads, and they determined kind of what the situation was, what the baseline was. And then they extrapolated, okay, in the case of Vermont in front of you, which is approximately 200 students, what would the situation be like if there were 450 students at Vermont? In other words, 2.5 times the current load. So they took the numbers that you have today, they extrapolated about the increased load, and essentially what the findings were is that you have significant vehicular drop-off congestion issues today. And you are not a suburban school district. If you look at that footprint, many of you have been to suburban school districts where you drive in these wide entrances and swooping drop-off lanes. Because of how tight the sites are in your community, you're relying on public roadways and public infrastructure, public sidewalks, as your parent drop-off, pick up, and everything. So we have very, very tight sites. So in this study that our traffic engineer did, conceptually, he would need 1,900 linear feet of drop-off at Vermont to make Vermont work for a 450 student school. And this concept would be bringing even an internal road for drop-off and pick up around the back of Vermont and up and over. And that red line just gives you a visual representation about what 1,900 feet would look like. Over at Hilltop, we also have problems, but of a different variety. Riley Road Oliver Road is very, very tight. So as cars are parked on both sides, you have a situation where vehicles can really only travel in one direction, but they don't do that. So when they travel in two directions, they're kind of darting into open driveways, and you have students crossing streets. Oliver is a very tight road. And again, that's our drop-off, and that's part of the public infrastructure. So at this location, to accommodate 450 students, we need approximately 2,000 lineal feet into a projected larger school. And you can see what 2,000 lineal feet looks like at the Hilltop site. So in summary, and we will have this traffic analysis posted on the district website. We would encourage you to look at it, look at the map and the numbers. In summary, we are not recommending any master plan option that significantly increases the load at any of the current sites. And kind of the bottom line of what that means is we really can't take Elm offline as a school because we don't have sites large enough to take the 200 students from Elm and redistribute them. Okay? So this is a pretty big deal. Okay. And we have one more big deal for you. All right, so we have a maximum $68.4 billion budget, and we have an understanding that we need 3 sites to support your current load. And third is, what about that school on the hill? And we heard a lot about this at the beginning of the summer. And in Hilltop, we hired a geotechnical engineer to do a soils analysis of what's happening. And so they came to Hilltop, and we drilled 3 soil borings on the downslope portion of Hilltop, right adjacent to where there were signs of the building cracking. And the question is, what's going on? So the soil borings were conducted. Inside one of the soil borings, they were putting what they call an inclinometer, which over the months, they were going to read to see if there's any downslope pressure. And they're also doing crack monitoring with these devices here that are installed on cracks, where we can measure horizontal and vertical movement. And again, this geotechnical report will be put on the district website for you to see. But the bottom line is the engineers do not believe that there's an active landslide event happening, that the building is cracking for a reason they describe as a creep. So there's some type of creep going on. And from their data, they think the creep could be attributed to the soil type under the building, which is a highly plastic soil. And the soil is of a variety that when it brings, and when moisture comes into it, it expands greatly and it shrinks greatly. And there's some soils issues going on there. So the question is this a suitable site for construction? And the answer, according to the geotechnical engineer, is it is. That we can look at this site as a future construction site with standard construction practices. If we were to do new build here with soil stabilization, line stabilization, we can solve that issue and keep Hilltop as a viable site for our future. So again, that's a huge input factor into this process as to what the master plan options are. So before I show you what the plan options are, let's start with our baseline existing. We're sitting here at the high school, serving grades 9-12 with 680 students. Middle school with 633 students. Elm today has 193, serving grades K-4. Vermont with 204 students, K-4. And Hilltop with 277 students K-4. Some data points on that. You can see the total square footage when you add up all the buildings together. And then the data point that we like to look at is, okay, what is the square foot per student? And you can see the numbers there in front of you. If the state were to come down and do a new build for you, at minimum, they would be recommending 125 square feet per student. So we are, just by the kind of the data points and the state standards, we are tight at those 3 existing schools. Let's start with option A1. A1 is 3 new K4s in their existing locations, serving the projected student load. So, new Elm for 200, a new Vermont for 200, and a new Hilltop for 350. To do that, we're going to have to abate and demolish the existing schools to create a clean site to build a new school. So the question is, where on earth will the students go while this happens? And while we don't have the final answer for that, we did solve a similar problem here in middle school, where we built a temporary middle school, for those of you that might remember, on the site of the, at the time, poorly performing baseball field. 600 students occupied that during that deep renovation and addition, and then they moved back in to the new school when that was completed. These look and feel like buildings, with hallways and classrooms and air conditioning. So we're proposing something similar, that we would need to build temporary schools to house all the students during the project. We have a budget for you, a conceptual planning budget. You can see the sizes of the buildings we're recommending. You can see how much bigger those buildings are compared to what you have today. And you can see what the square foot per student count is. And that increase in square foot per student will go a long way to serving the space needs that have been identified. We have a planning budget of $535 a square foot. That's all in, hard costs, soft costs. This is projected for a winter bid event in over 2 years from now. And then we have to abate and demolish Elm, Vermont, and Hilltop. And then I mentioned the temporary schools. This is the word swing space. So we have budgeted for swing space for all of those, and we added up, and we're right at our $68.4 million maximum budget. Advantages and drawbacks. So these were derived from community conversations. These are derived from our engagement with the primary facility steering committee, kind of everything we heard today. These surely aren't the only pros and cons, but these are the things we heard, and we wanted to put these on paper for you kind of as a baseline, or to kind of trigger your own thoughts as you think about these options as to issues that have been brought up before. So from a potential advantage standpoint, this is a status quo plan that promotes the walkability that we have today. It minimizes the transitions. By transitions, we mean the students are in the same building from K4, just one building before moving up to the middle school. Since they're new builds, we can build the square footage, all of the room sizes to the square footage you need to meet our program. Some of the older students can serve as mentors to the younger students. It amplifies or enforces the uniqueness that you have in your community with the Elm District, Elm School, and Hilltop in Vermont. And then increased energy efficiency. This will be compared to its cousin, and that with all new construction, we're able to build a code-compliant, tight building structure and have a higher performing school compared to A2 exceeding. Potential drawbacks. Speaking to your educators, there's issues relative to education service delivery, where you have gifted intervention, special ed area teachers who are traveling around the district, serving the same grade level but in multiple buildings. So there's some inefficiency there. Let's say the third grade teachers want to collaborate. They're all in 3 different buildings. The students don't come to you in even packages of sizes. So if you have a high number of kindergarten students in one building and lower in the other, you have less flexibility on how you place those students in the school. And then due to its size, Hilltop would be the location for half-day kindergarten. All right, its cousin, A2, very, very similar, same plan. However, we would propose to handle Vermont and Elm as additions and renovations. And before I get into that too bad, I want to just kind of provide some context of what that looks like. And the best visual picture would be the middle school. So the middle school is addition and renovation. So on the renovation portion, the front portion, when you drive by, it looks exactly like it did before. So as we're renovating Elm and renovating Vermont, when you drive by, it's going to look like the same school. However, on the addition side, right, you can do what you want to do for that portion. So we call this an ad reno. So ad, can you see the word ad? Just means an addition. In this case, it would be some type of addition adjacent to Elm or Vermont to increase the size of those schools. And then for a renovation, then if you've been inside the middle school, you'll know that really all those existing walls that were there are pretty much still there, all the load-bearing walls. So what we're really not talking about is gutting interior walls. Most of the interior walls would remain. However, we deal with the envelope, the roofing, the windows, the masonry, all new systems, mechanical, electric, plumbing, fire protection, technology, etc. All new finishes and new casework. So that's kind of what we mean when we talk about an addition and a renovation. So if you look at the Vermont, for example, if this were to be renovated, the exterior walls would remain, and all these interior primary load-bearing walls would also remain. So essentially, after renovation, there's some walls you can move, but it's essentially going to feel and function and flow much like it does today. Hilltop. Hilltop has its own unique issues, to be honest with, in that it has problems that really aren't solvable in renovation. So from a safety and security standpoint, having 4 different buildings on 4 different elevations really doesn't make sense from an 80-year kind of planning perspective. So in all of these cousins, the A2, B2, C2, D2, you'll see our recommendation at Hilltop is for a building replacement. So back to A2, we have ad renos at Vermont and Elm, and a new build for K4 at Hilltop. It has its own unique budget. I won't get into too much detail, but it's a slightly less expensive cost per square foot for the renovation because the building is there. And you can see the cost for the additions also shown at $545. Our demo cost reduces at Elm and Vermont since those buildings would remain. And our swing space would remain the same because in a deep renovation and like middle school, we really need to get the kids out of the building to safely do the work. Pros and cons. I will not repeat similar ones. I'll just highlight the differences. So the advantages are all the same. Potential drawback is we would have one of the primaries being a new school, and 2 of them being additions and renovations. For the renovation portion, potentially lower energy performance at those buildings that we're intending to keep. Not all room sizes in the renovation would meet the district standards because we have to be working within existing exterior and interior bearing walls. It's the same. And it's all the same. Okay, so that's A1 and A2. All right, so we're going to put a little bit of creativity down on here for B1. So B1, and yes, you do have handouts of these. B1 is to offload 4th grade from the primaries and put it at the middle school. So the thought here is we have K3s, neighborhood K3s, and by pulling that load of the student count out of the primary schools, it would help towards the issue of congestion. When we designed the middle school over a decade ago, the issue of the primary schools was known. And so this is the first, second, and third floor plan. Point your eyeball on the second floor plan. This portion of the building we designed to add a 3rd floor to. So when you look at the 3rd floor plan, you can see the stairs, the elevator are here. We also plan for the windows that can knock out, and we plan for the potential of adding a 4th grade addition as a third floor over the existing second floor. Okay? So in this option, the potential upside of this is at the middle school, we can address 150 fourth grade students at only 89 square feet per student. We can handle them more efficiently because the student dining room is there, the gym is there, 4 music rooms are there, the 2 programs are there, the media center is there. All that infrastructure is already built. We would essentially just be adding the fourth grade to it. So as that becomes more efficient, we're able to increase the square footage, increase the square foot per student at the 3 primary schools to give them a little bit more space to do it. See, the abatement demos and the swing space, pretty much the same cost. The advantages: preserves K-3 walkability, preserves the neighborhood uniqueness, minimizes the transitions. These have all been mentioned before. Reduces the number of students at the primary schools to improve traffic congestion at those locations. And we do receive the benefit of those efficient student service deliveries now for the fourth grade. The fourth grade, the concept is we can fast track that addition and move fourth grade up at the middle school, and then only have to do swing space for K-3. So an upside is potentially fourth grade would avoid those temporary schools during the life of the project. There's also some natural K-3, 4, 5 developmental groupings that this option really reinforces. Drawbacks: requires 4 construction sites, and we're increasing the traffic load at the middle school, and we need to do some restructuring of the bell schedule at the middle school, lunches, etc., to take the additional grade up. And B2 is its cousin, same plan with Elm and Vermont being addition and renovations. And forgot to mention the swing space budget is reduced because of we're only serving grades K3 versus K4, so there's more dollars that we can put up on additional square footage in the building. And advantages would be the same. Potential drawbacks are this idea of lower energy performance at the additional renovations, and that's pretty much the end. All right, C1. So the C's and the D's have some form of consolidated grade band. In C1, you would have a pair of K2s. So 1 K2 at Elm for 200 students, and 1 K2 at Vermont for 250. The reason the students are different is you have approximately 7 classrooms per grade level. You can't quite 7.5, so slightly more the students would go at Vermont than at Elm, which is a larger site. And then Hilltop for grade 3 to 4. In that case, these are all new builds. You can see the square feet per student. And the potential advantages are that this gets into the educational service efficiency, where all the third and fourth graders would be in one building, and K and 2 would just be in 2 buildings versus 3. As I mentioned, enhanced collaboration with staff. All third grade teachers would be in one building. All second grade teachers, instead of being 3, would be in 2. We could also design buildings specifically for that kind of early learning K2 environment versus the intermediate, in terms of how the building feels and what it communicates. And then more flexibility with student placement, because, for example, all the third and fourth graders are all in the same building, so we don't have that tracking how they're divided between the buildings. Drawbacks: less walkability, more student transitions. Right? A student would go to more buildings in this plan than they do today. Some of the families who had multiple age young children would be having an issue of the multiple drop-offs and the multiple pickups, and then loss of that older peer mentorship and connection with the younger kids. C2, its cousin, same with Elm and Vermont, getting additions and renovations as opposed to new. and the advantages are the same, and the drawbacks are similar to the other options in graduation. And lastly, D1. D1 is a district-wide kindergarten early learning center at Hilltop. So you'd have one site for all the kids, and then neighborhood 1-4s. And how this could look in the district, I live in Oakwood, and it's set up similar to where we have an off-site kindergarten. And we had a kindergartner, we had a first grader, and a third grader, and we'd all walk to our neighborhood school, and then our kindergartner got on a bus and bused to the primary. So in theory, if you had a family, they could all drop off here, and the kindergartners could ride a bus, Hilltop from here, and here, and back, and you still kind of keep intact that community feel with a family drop off and a family pickup. You see its budget. And then advantages and drawbacks. So we still promote walkability. This is how we kind of unpack that idea about each family or each grade still kind of reports to the neighborhood school. We're still minimizing transitions except for K between the buildings. So we retain the 1-4 mentorship opportunities. We support bringing all the students, the students arrive at each of the buildings at different levels at kindergarten, and it kind of is a way to bring them all together and get all the cowboys on the same page prior to start with the educational career. And then you can see the drawbacks here. Similar to others. And then D2 is the same plan, but again, Elm and Vermont handled just its additions, renovations, and Hilltop was moved. The potential advantages would be the same, and the potential drawbacks would be similar to previous options with just the idea of utilizing the existing potential locations. With that, we have a summary sheet that also is a lot of data, and they just did a one sheet that puts all the facts and all the figures on one sheet so you can compare square footage and option and rate banding. So you see the A's, B's, C's, and D's here. And I'm going to quickly walk us through what our next steps are before our breakouts. So the district on the website, later this week or early next week, we'll have an online feedback form where you'll be able to log in and provide your feedback, provide your opinion on the options. We would highly encourage you to do that. We have our committee form 2 and 3, which I mentioned, talked about the board, potential approval June 24th, the vote. And then if the vote is successful, we have approximately a year of design and with construction looking somewhere in that 27 to 28 timeframe. So just want to kind of get that out there, the duration of the project, what we're looking at. And then, all right, work session breakouts. So at this point, when you came in on your packet, there's a number on the top right of your packet. And you're going to be assigned groups 1 through 8. And I'm going to have Tim add some additional detail on that in a second. In your group, you'll see all the options on the walls, all the factors, all the pros and cons. Again, that is just to get your brains moving. We would highly encourage things you haven't considered, comments, feedback, questions, all of that. We would greatly appreciate that. With the primary goal being just to make sure we're all on the same page, we understand what the options are that we're considering so we can move forward. There'll be post-it notes out there, so if you have specific questions, specific comments, you can write it on a post-it note and stick it up. Those will be received, categorized, brought back through the primary facility steering committee, and then those will lead up to a FAQ page that we'll do to get all the questions grouped and answered. And then lastly, for fun, You have 3 dots on your, on the handout as you walked in. Those are going to be your chance to vote tonight. So you'll see all the options on there. If you really love a plan, you can throw all 3 green stickers on. If you want, if you're not sure, you can spread them out as you wish. That'll be a fun little dotting exercise, which will give us some kind of just quick little feedback on the reappraisal. So with that, I thank you for your time and your attention. And Tim.
Thank you again for sharing time with us this evening to be part of this conversation. We really appreciate your attendance tonight and look forward to the next part of this, which is the work session breakout teams. I will say also, we have the dot exercise that you'll be participating in if you're in work sessions. But then also, as we do send a feedback form out to the entire community, we would like everyone to participate in that activity also. So tonight's activity is for those in attendance here today, but then we'll get that feedback form to our entire community. We invite you all to participate in that as well as our entire community. So with this, we thought it might be easier if we just went one group at a time. So if you find the group number that you'll be visiting with, I will introduce the group facilitator. And again, what I'll ask them to do is just stand up, and then we'll walk out one group at a time, just to make sure everyone knows exactly where they're going.